Right then, pull up a chair, grab a pint, or a cup of tea if you're feeling proper, and let's talk about the Shinsengumi. Not some fancy new sushi roll, mind you, but a band of bloody samurai ruffians from 19th century Japan. If you thought your local pub's bouncer was a bit heavy-handed, wait till you hear about these blokes. They were the unofficial, self-appointed, utterly chaotic police force of Kyoto during a time when Japan was basically having a nervous breakdown. Think Peaky Blinders meets samurai flicks, but with even more dramatic death scenes and a whole lot less industrial grime. So picture this. It's the mid-1800s in Japan. The shogunate, which had been running the show for, about 250 years, is starting to look a bit shaky, like a grand old manor house with dry rot in the foundations. The emperor, who'd been more of a ceremonial figurehead for centuries, think the Queen of England but with even less actual power, is suddenly becoming a rallying cry. Revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. That was the chant, and by barbarians, they meant anyone not Japanese, especially those pesky Americans and Europeans who were turning up with their big ships and even bigger demands to open up trade. This whole kerfuffle, this massive cultural and political shift, was called the Bakumatsu period. It was basically a free-for-all, with loyalists to the emperor, the Ishishi, and those who wanted to stick with the old shogun, the shogunate loyalists, squaring off. Kyoto, the imperial capital, was a hotbed of unrest. Imagine London during the Blitz, but instead of bombs, you've got sword fights breaking out in the street, political assassinations, and everyone constantly looking over their shoulder. It was a proper mess. And into this glorious chaos steps our lads, the Shinsengumi. Now, the Shinsengumi didn't exactly start out as a polished, disciplined fighting force. Oh no. They began as a motley crew of masterless samurai, ronin, farmers, and anyone else who fancied a bit of swordplay and a cause to fight for. They were originally part of a larger group called the Roshigumi, formed by a shogunate loyalist to protect the shogun during his trip to Kyoto. But like any good boy band, they quickly had a falling out and split. A few ambitious chaps, notably a fearsome dude named Kondo Isami, a charismatic but sometimes morally ambiguous Hijikata Toshizo, and the legendary swordsman Okita Soji, decided to form their own little band of merry men. They set up shop in Mibu, a district in Kyoto, and earned themselves the rather cool nickname the Wolves of Mibu, Mibu Roshi. Why wolves? Well, because they were fierce, relentless, and probably had a habit of showing up unannounced and causing a ruckus. They were brutal, effective, and had absolutely no qualms about chopping down anyone they deemed a threat to the shogunate's authority. Their code was simple, brutal, and utterly uncompromising. Loyalty to the shogun, absolute obedience within the ranks, and death to anyone who broke the rules. And they really meant that last part. Desertion, death. Borrowing money without permission, death. Getting into a private fight, believe it or not, also death. It was less a set of rules and more a very clear instruction manual on how not to get your head lopped off by your mates. Their big break, the moment they went from a bunch of rowdy blokes to a feared force, was the Ikedaya Affair in 1864. This was less an affair and more a full-blown massacre. The Shinsengumi got wind of a plot by radical loyalists to set Kyoto on fire, kidnap the emperor, and cause all sorts of lovely mayhem. So, Kondo Isami, Hijikata, and a small squad raided the Ikedaya Inn, where these plotters were holed up. What followed was a bloody, chaotic brawl in the narrow confines of the inn. Swords flashed, bodies fell, and the Shinsengumi proved just how utterly ruthless and efficient they could be. They stopped the plot, saved Kyoto from burning, and became instant heroes to the shogunate. To the emperor loyalists, they became the bloody devils in Black Hari. It was a massive PR win for them, even if the streets literally ran red with the blood of their enemies. By the way, get this despite the Shinsengumi's fierce reputation and strict code. Many of their members were actually from non-samurai backgrounds. Kondo Isami himself was the son of a farmer, and many others were ronin or even commoners who aspired to the samurai way of life. This was pretty unusual for the time, showing that even in rigid feudal Japan, a man with a sharp sword and a bit of grit could climb the social ladder, even if it was smeared with the blood of their enemies. It made them a bit of an outcast to the traditional samurai, but it also meant they were hungry, disciplined, and had everything to prove. Now let's put on our fancy thinking caps for a moment, shall we? Was the Shinsengumi morally clear in their purpose? Well, from their perspective, absolutely. Their purpose was to uphold the shogunate, maintain order in a crumbling system, and eliminate those who threatened that order. They saw themselves as defenders of the peace, albeit a peace enforced with a very sharp katana. But did they act with purpose, or just for the thrill of power? That's where it gets murky. While their initial motivations might have been pure loyalty, the power they wielded, the absolute authority they were given, definitely had an intoxicating effect. Their enforcement of the rules within their own ranks, leading to numerous internal purges and executions, suggests a slippery slope from maintaining order to maintaining absolute control through fear. Was this more about belief in the shogun, or was it about the raw, visceral action of fighting and the authority that came with it? Probably a bit of both. Like a good strong ale that's just a little too easy to get drunk on. Consider the trade-offs. Their brutal efficiency in suppressing dissent certainly brought a temporary sense of order to Kyoto. But at what cost? They alienated many, fueled the anti-shogunate sentiment even further, and ultimately became a symbol of the old, dying order. They were the sledgehammer used to crack a nut, but the nut was already starting to crack from within, and the sledgehammer just made a bigger mess. Imagine a typical afternoon in Mibu. You're a young, eager recruit, fresh from the countryside, dreaming of samurai glory. You've just finished a grueling sword practice, your arms ache, and you're covered in sweat. You head to the common room for a well-deserved bowl of rice and some pickles. Suddenly the door bursts open. It's Hijikata, looking like he just swallowed a lemon and is about to spit it back out. Right! Word from our spies. Some ronin are planning something dodgy down by the Kamo River. Kondo wants them dealt with. And by dealt with, I mean dealt with permanently. Okita, you're with me. Saito, grab your sword. Anyone else want to earn their keep? No one dares say no. You grab your sword, a nervous flutter in your stomach. This isn't like the practice drills. This is real. This is where the legends are made, or where your head ends up on a pike. You follow them out into the bustling Kyoto streets, the setting sun casting long shadows. You hear the whispers of the townsfolk as you pass. The Wolves of Mibu. A shiver goes down your spine. For a moment, you feel like a hero. Then you remember the stern faces of Kondo and Hijikata, the strict rules and the glint of steel. And you realize you're just a cog in a very sharp, very dangerous machine. What if the Shinsengumi had chosen a different path? What if, instead of being the shogun's enforcers, they had embraced the changing times and sided with the emperor? Imagine Kondo Isami, with his charisma and leadership, turning his formidable fighting force towards unifying Japan under a new banner. Perhaps they could have been instrumental in ushering in the Meiji Restoration with less bloodshed, acting as a bridge between the old ways and the new. They might have become celebrated national heroes, not just fierce loyalists to a doomed cause. But then, would they still be the Shinsengumi we know? Their identity was forged in conflict, in being the last desperate stand for a fading era. A Shinsengumi of peace might have been less dramatic, less tragic, and certainly less legendary. Sometimes the most compelling stories are born from the most desperate circumstances, even if they end in tragedy. The Shinsengumi, for all their ferocity and dedication, ultimately fought on the losing side. The shogunate fell. The emperor was restored to power, and Japan underwent a rapid modernization known as the Meiji Restoration. Many Shinsengumi members were killed in battle, executed, or faded into obscurity. Kondo Isami himself was captured and beheaded, a grim end for a man who had sworn absolute loyalty. Hijikata Toshizo, ever the loyal and pragmatic warrior, fought on until the very end, dying in battle during the last stand of the shogunate forces in Hokkaido. Okita Soji, the brilliant swordsman, succumbed to tuberculosis, a quiet, tragic end for a man who lived by the blade. Their story is a potent reminder of loyalty, fanaticism, and the brutal realities of political upheaval. They were men caught in a maelstrom of change, clinging to an old order that was destined to fall. They were ruthless, yes, but they were also driven by a fierce sense of duty and a code of honor that, while bloody, was undeniably theirs. They represent a tragic, romantic, and utterly brutal chapter in Japanese history. They were the last samurai of a dying age, wolves fighting against the inevitable tide of progress, leaving behind a legacy of both fear and grudging admiration. Stay curious, stay sharp, and stay just sober enough to remember it all. This was just a swig of history, and if it wasn't in your textbook, it bloody well should have been. And before you go, do a brother fave and like, share and subscribe.